Hey everyone, this is Keith Baker. I am the host of the Dancing with Cancer podcast, where we talk about how to live an upbeat, joyful life in the middle of the cancer storm. Let's go. Hey everyone, it's Keith Baker with the Dancing with Cancer podcast, episode 14. It's my life and I'll do what I want to do episode. So far on these episodes, for the most part, I've just been sharing my life, sharing my journey as we're traveling down this cancer road and just kind of dealing with issues as they unfold and those types of things. And probably for me, the hardest part so far, again, for me, has been avoiding crowds and avoiding large groups of people. So, because of my cancer, I'm taking Jakafi. Jakafi is a JAK2 inhibitor. It's to shrink my spleen and to treat some of the symptoms that I'm having, but it is also an immunosuppressant, meaning that it weakens my immune system. It's one of the side effects, if you will, of the medication. In addition to that, as most of you know, I have Crohn's disease, and I'm taking Humira to treat my Crohn's disease. And the Humira is also an immunosuppressant, meaning that it also weakens my immune system, which means my immune system is probably getting kind of weak. So because of that, we try to avoid large crowds as a big, broad general rule. Now, there's some cases where we try to do it with a mask, for example, or if it's outside. A lot of times we're a little more comfortable with it because of that you're outside, right? You're not congested where you have a higher risk of catching a cold, that kind of stuff. So when you read a lot of information on myelofibrosis, which is the actual cancer that I have, often it's not the myelofibrosis that kills a person in many cases, but what happens often is the myelofibrosis weakens your body, and then you end up dying of a heart attack, of a stroke, or in many cases just simply getting the flu, and your body can't fight it off because your immune system's been weakened, or you're catching a cold, or other things of that nature. And so we're just trying to use some common sense. I know that's new for me. I'm not really known for using a lot of common sense, but hey, let's give it a shot, right? Anyways, so as an example, right, for church, we've been staying home and participating in the streaming services that our church offers. Now, I gotta be honest, it's not the same as being in the building with the brothers and sisters and the family and worshiping and just being there. You don't get to interact with each other and share stories and those types of things. And so that is dearly missed. But for the moment, that's the option that we feel is the wisest in my current situation. So we are participating in the streaming services for church. So I had a thing come up a week and a half ago where my Uncle Jesse, my mom's brother, passed away. And almost immediately it was like a done deal. Hey, we're going to West Virginia, right? Because they're going to have a funeral and we got to be there. Just a little history. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. My dad is from Norwood, which is in the Cincinnati area. And my mom is from West Virginia. And so growing up, almost every year, if not every year, we would spend at least 1 week in West Virginia visiting her family, or the Bischoff family. And it was just a huge, huge part of my growing up experience. I just have a ton of amazing memories from those years. Um, Whether it was running around in the woods, climbing. I mean, in West Virginia, they got these like huge, huge rocks. As little boys, we climb in the rocks and probably doing all kinds of stupid stuff, but we're boys, right? And we're going out hunting in the woods. Um, as we got a little bit older, Jesse, my uncle that passed, had three boys, and the two younger boys were right in the same age range as my brother Wayne and me. And Steve was just a little bit older. But because of that, we kind of grew up together. And so there were a lot of times we'd be doing things with Jesse and his family, his boys, our cousins. I remember as just even a young man riding mini bikes, right? They had a Suzuki 50, if my memory serves correctly, was the first one. Yes, that's me on the motorbike there, or the mini bike. And, it seemed like once that got started, like every year or every other year, the bike size got bigger, right? I think there was a Honda 70 or 90, I can't remember which was next, and maybe a 125, 185, maybe 250. I don't remember exactly what size each bike was, but I just remember each couple of years it seemed like we were riding bigger bikes when we got there. And for me, again, the whole thing was so much fun. I loved my aunts and uncles. We had, mom had four siblings. Carol, Bobby, Jean, Jesse. Yeah, four siblings. Jeez, getting old. And but I grew up in the suburbs, right, of Cincinnati, and so um, where my grandparents and my cousins and uncles and all that was a much more of a rural area, country area, a lot of farms, that kind of stuff, And so it was just a different type of surroundings, a different speed to life, a different everything. And I just found it very refreshing and very enjoyable as a kid growing up in that environment. And of course, we're boys, or me and my brother was, anyways. I've got a younger sister as well. But there were a lot of times like we would give our cousins a hard way to go, or they'd give us a hard way to go, and they'd be teasing us a bunch of city slickers, and that kind of stuff, and we get called them hillbillies or rednecks or whatever. It was all in fun, but we just razzing each other, that kind of stuff. Anyways, so I got all these memories of the years and the visits to West Virginia, and so when I found out that my uncle Jesse passed, I mean, almost immediately I was going like, let's go. And so I mean, just without even thinking about it, I threw it out, and Kathy says, I said, hey, let's get ready to go to West Virginia. And before I even knew what the timing was or what the actual funeral dates was, that kind of thing, and Kathy says, you ain't going to West Virginia. What do you mean I ain't going to West Virginia? And then she kind of paused a little bit, and she looked me in the eye and says, we may want to talk about this and think about this a little bit with the crowds and those kinds of things. And as usual, she was right in this situation. Please don't tell her I said that. I'll deny it. But as usual, she was right. It was kind of a knee-jerk reaction, and like the automatic thing is I want to be there with my cousins and at least let them know that I'm thinking about them, praying for them, and again, I have so many fond memories of Jesse and his boys, as well as my other uncles and aunts and those types of things. But again, it probably would not have been wise for me to have gone, and as much as I would have loved to have been there and just to be with family and laugh and tell the stories and reminisce and all of those types of things, wisdom prevailed, and I ended up not going to that. So for me, again, in this cancer journey, this has really been a struggle for me, that just avoiding crowds. It's very I don't know, it's just not natural for me. And um, anyways, while we're on that subject, or a similar subject, while we're talking about family, okay, it kind of leads me into a segue into what I really wanted to talk about today. And it's kind of changing up course a little bit. Again, sharing a little more of my own story and some of those kinds of things. But again, as I shared earlier, my dad grew up in Norwood, Ohio. It's very close to Cincinnati, Ohio. My mom grew up in West Virginia, Brewston Mills, which is kind of in the, I guess, one of the closer big towns in Morgantown, maybe. Again, I'll probably get grief if I'm not got that right. But I was a kid most of the growing up days. Anyways, um, the episode today is It's My Life and I'm going to live it how I want to live it. And I just want to talk about, we hear this often in our modern culture, in our modern society, that, you know what, it's my life. It's nobody else's business what I do. Um, and I'm going to make whatever choices I'm going to make. It's my right. And it doesn't affect anybody else anyway. So it's none of their business. And to be frank and to be honest, we live in America. And as Americans, you have a right to make your choices for your life. Absolutely. Hands down, without reservation. And I would never want to take that right away from anybody else. You have a right to choose to make choices that impact your life. The only partial warning, I guess I would want to place on that or clarify on that is, yes, you have every right to do whatever you want to do, but the idea that I'm going to do whatever I want to do because it's my life and it doesn't affect anybody else is total BS. And what I mean by that, it's kind of the lie hidden inside of the truth, right? So the truth is, yes, you live in America, and yes, you have every right to make every choice that affects your life. But the lie hidden inside of that is that my choices don't affect anybody else. And that is, there's nothing that could be farther from the truth. The fact of the matter is, every choice you make impacts yourself, your family, sometimes your friends, your children, grandchildren. And just to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, I just wanted to give you a little more background on my own family situation. So, my dad was raised by his mother, Elsie, my grandmother, as a single mom in the 30s and 40s, right? And this is like way before it was politically okay to be a single mother. You understand what I'm saying? It was just way before that time. And my understanding is it was a very, very difficult life for them. But my grandmother became determined at a very, very young age or early age that she was going to raise her boy in church and she was going to, as best she can, expose her son to Jesus Christ. And although it was a very, very difficult life and an uphill battle, she stuck by her guns and she kept my dad in church for his entire growing up period, right? And I remember my dad telling me several times that while his mother was very well meaning, she had to have a job to, just to feed them. And so oftentimes he was on his own and as a young boy would get into mischief and got away with a lot more than he should have. And probably the one thing that made the biggest difference in his life and the only male role models he had were other men from church. and that there were a handful of men from church who went out of their way to help them, to be there for my dad, to support my dad, those types of things. And they became his role model for what a man should be, or what it looked like to become a man as a boy growing up. Why am I mentioning this? Because when I think of that original thought, it's my life, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, I think of my grandmother and the sacrifices she made and the choices she made, and how she was determined to expose her son to the gospel, to Jesus Christ. And her choices that she made not only affected her life, but they affected her son's life, because my dad did dedicate his life to Jesus Christ as a young life. But it also affected his three kids, right? Me, my brother, my sister, we're all three, grew up in church, dedicated our own lives to Christ, and are now followers of Christ. Both of my children are now in church, and my daughter is raising her two children in church as believers. She wants them to know and be exposed to Jesus Christ and have that transformation that comes from knowing Jesus Christ. Okay, so let's go to the other side, right? So my mom grows up in West Virginia, right? My grandma and grandfather, and they live on a farm, and in my again, you're talking the 40s and 50s. I'm sure that money was very tight for them. That you kind of live off the land, if you will. And as a teenager, at some point, my mom felt like God wanted her to go to Bible school. And it just happened that the Bible school she went to, or felt God leading her to, was God's Bible school in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, she was still a minor when this all came about and unfolded. And I'm sure that my grandmother and grandfather didn't have a lot of extra money to pay for getting her there and pay for the schooling and to do those types of things. And yet they found a way to make it happen. And so once again, I find that my life has been impacted by decisions that were made before I was even alive. Right? So my decisions, my dad's mom on the one side is determined to raise her son as a single mom in church so that her son knows Jesus Christ. On the other side, I've got my grandmother and my grandfather somehow, again, their teenage daughter comes to them, and I don't know a lot of the specifics and the details, but shares her heart that she feels like God's calling her to Bible school, to go to a school in another state as a minor. Would I have let my teenagers get all kinds of crazy ideas and whims and so on and so forth. Would I have let my teenage daughter leave as a minor and go to another state? I don't know. I hope that if it was truly a God thing, that God would reveal that to me so that I could do that. But man, that would be hard, right? That would be so, so hard. And then there's the whole, how do we pay for it? How do we do this? When things, I just imagine that life was tough in those days. Growing up on a farm, 5 kids, and trying to pay for it. But somehow they were able to have enough faith, vision, I'm not sure the correct terminology, to do that, to make that happen. And so my mom and my dad met at God's Bible School in Cincinnati, Ohio. So this girl over here in West Virginia lands in Cincinnati, Ohio at a Bible college, and that's where my parents meet. And so again, my life, my children's lives, my grandchildren's lives are all being impacted by decisions that were made before I was alive. Think about that. Think about that and let that soak in. Because what that means is, not only does it mean that my life has been, in a good way, impacted by decisions that were made before I was alive, it means that the decisions I make, my decisions, don't just impact my life, but they also impact my children's life, my grandchildren's life, maybe my great-grandchildren's life, maybe my great-great-grandchildren's life. Because again, my grandparents, the decisions they made, both of them, on both sides, were difficult decisions and probably required sacrifice, but their decisions impacted their children, their grandchildren, us, their great-grandchildren, my children, their great-great-grandchildren, my grandchildren. And so I just want to challenge you to stretch your thinking when it comes to this concept, this idea that, hey, it's my life. I can do whatever I want to do. It doesn't impact anybody else. That's crazy. And there's only one person who wants you to believe that, and that is Satan. Because it's much easier to manipulate you. And it's much easier to make poor decisions and bad decisions when you don't recognize the ramifications of those decisions. When you don't recognize that you're laying a foundation, not just for yourself, not just for your family, but for your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, by the choices you make. And it can be a great foundation, or it can be a horrible foundation. In my case, because of choices my grandparents made and then choices my parents made, they gave me a running start on a positive life, a good life, a spirit-filled life. But it can work the other way just as well. I believe there are people who pass generational curses to their children, to the grandchildren, to the great-grandchildren because of the choices they make, because they took the easy road, because they indulged in a lot of things that they probably knew wasn't right or wasn't good, but they were on the short term. They didn't see the long-term vision. They didn't recognize what really was going on in the big picture. So hopefully this gets you to thinking just a little bit about the potential of your choices that you make, and the fact that, yes, you live in America. Yes, you have the freedom of choice to make any choices you want to make. And I will never want to take your choices away. But just be aware that there are consequences to those choices. Love you guys. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time. Hey, thanks to everyone for stopping by. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the like button. Also, please slam that subscribe button to ensure that you do not miss on any future episodes. Lastly, if you know someone who needs encouragement or who is going through a difficult time, please share this with them. More than anything else, we want to share this joy and hope that we have with as many people as possible. And we'd love to have others join the Dancing with Cancer family. Until next time, adios.